Hey, what is going on, guys? I'm Mario, and welcome back to another 3D modeling tutorial. This time we're going to talk about topology, and this is a very general topic. So these principles can apply to any 3D modeling software, so it really doesn't matter are you using Maya, Cinema 4D, Blender, or any other. So this is a very general principle, and it will apply literally in every package, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, on the second note, I would like to mention that some of the examples that I'm going to cover here are coming from our Discord servers. So if you're not, let me see. So if you haven't joined yet, you can. I will leave a link in the description down below. So there you can ask any questions, and if you have similar problems, feel free to share there. And like in this example, I noticed that there is a lot of repeating problems that have more or less the same solution. So I thought that I will cover it here. And on top of that, I did a pretty sizable article here on my website where you can go ahead and check if you wish. So what it's about, everything that it's covered there is going to be covered here in the video, but this is just in case that something that I missed. Also, I would like to mention that in one of the examples that we have here, this as a specific example is already covered in avoiding deformation on curved surfaces Cinema 4D. So it's kind of a connected topic. But okay, enough of the introduction. Let's jump into our example and let's start there. All right, so I took the liberty to recreate part of this object right here. Many of them are similar, and I will explain this one first. And we're just going to go through and see what is the problem and how we can deal with similar problems in the future. So by default, on flat surfaces, you shouldn't see any deformation. But since we're using sub-D modeling, and in case of sub-D, a lot of those surfaces are going to be, let me just go to bend. They're going to be bent or on some sort of angle. So in many situations, you will not work with flat surfaces. That's what I'm trying to say. So if I now apply a little bit deformation here, we can see where problem occurs. So in the highlight itself, you can see that there is small pinching here, and this pinching is slowly transitioning into this smooth surface. If we check this angle here, we can see we have a nice curve, but on the other side, if we now go and see, it is not so much curved. So there is like this flat line breaking this curve. So let me just first explain what is happening, and then we're gonna see how to fix it. So what's happening, so even though that this is not the result you maybe want, but this edge flow will tell you exactly what is going to happen. So what is happening is that on one side, you can see that there is a pattern to this, and the pattern is fairly equal. As you can see, it's fairly straight, and it doesn't have so much, let's say, randomness as this one. So if you compare these two shapes, you can clearly see where the difference is. And one side, remember, is fairly curved and the other one is not. So this is what I meant, that this flow is already telling you what is going to happen, because on one end you have this nice and even out spread, and the other side you have this spread that looks like this. So you have a wide, large area that is empty, there is no edges, and then in the small area you have two edges connecting into one. And basically, as a result, this area is now empty, has no edges to support it, because we basically borrowed this edge here, which was our structural edge, and basically the edge that we needed. If I go and edit edge flow, this is the edge that was originally there, if you remember. Same like on the other side, and it was our structural one, and it was holding that curvature in one place. But since we decided to borrow this edge, what I want to do is push it, slide it up, Now then we get that result. So one thing that we can learn from this is that once we have our structural edges, and this would be our structural edge already solved, we should not then borrow these edges for another use. So let me just go back a couple of steps until we reach our main shape. So I would like to just break down a couple of rules that we are going to follow here. One rule, and actually that's going to be the first rule, is that we should start with our meshes as low poly as possible. So let me just come here. So we need to start very, very low poly. That would be our first rule. Because the mesh is easier to control and it will help us establish our shape faster. That simply now means, let me just remove all this first. I'll leave this, and this actually I need, so I can remove this. I can remove this as well. This also remove, and I will also remove this. So this means, like this example that you see now on the screen, is that this is the lowest edge poly vertice count that we need. Basically, everything here is holding the shape. If we remove now one more, our shape will not be the same anymore. So we are losing that integrity, no? So this is going to be our first rule. Now let's go again through the rules just real quick. So the second rule, we need to make sure that we have even edge distribution. So even edge distribution means just that, because we saw in that previous example, like in this here, the edges are fairly uneven and there's simply not enough geometry. If you now take a look in all of these examples, there is one problem that it's constantly appearing, and that is lack of topology, simply not enough geometry to support specific details. So same example here and also here. So a lot of edges coming here, and this titled area, well, let's say you see this area is fairly empty and this area is fairly condensed, so that will also leave an impact on your mesh. So what will happen? So let's say first rule, like we mentioned, just as low poly as possible so you can manipulate the shapes faster. And just quick recap, sorry again, I'm going off topic, but if I now, let's say, want to move this edge, I'm in low poly and I can simply move this edge and create interesting looking forms just by low poly. If I would now have, let's say, same area and I want to do same effect with multiple edges, now this would be a different story. Now I would really need to struggle. And in this case, if you always come in this case, whatever is not structural, you can always remove the edges and bring them back, do the adjustments, and then bring back those edges. Okay, so again, rule number 2 was even distribution of the edges everywhere. So, and same thing would now apply here. If I would now, let's say, do something like this, this would not be the same as this. And I'm going to show again an example what I mean by that. So I'm just going to delete the history one more time in case, and let's add another band deformer here, and let me do a small band, subdivide, and there we are. So as you can notice, even though without much effort, we do have a small curve here and we have nice and smooth curve here. So even distribution means nice. So just something to keep in mind. And if we now recreate the same issue, we'll see that borrowing the structural edges will cause specific issues. Now, the difference is if this is something that you really want to have as a detail, like let's say something like that, that's a different thing. But here just we are talking about the general rules that we need to approach, because once you know these general rules, then you can easily break them later and do whatever you want with them. So this is just something to begin with and keep in mind. So if you would have started with this, and in comparison again, now you can see much more clear where those problems might occur. So we'll just make again a few steps back. One other thing I would like to mention, because you might ask yourself, what is enough of geometry for this even distribution, when is too much? I usually do one, let's say, subdivision, because this would be now 2 subdivision, and this is now just 2 dense, because what you're trying to do is just slightly always step up your game. So meaning that if this is your starting point, you started to manipulate this and maybe you want more shapes out of it, so you will probably do a couple of more subdivisions so that you have more edges to work with, and then you can create more interesting shapes. So, okay, to summarize, we had 2 rules so far. So first rule is starting very low poly, making sure that we have only enough of edges and polygons that we need. Second thing is, once we established our shape, so more or less that we commit to the shape that we want, then we even it out, so even the spread of edges. And then as the third note, as the third rule, what we need to do is we need to add supportive edge, which is this one. And now we maybe don't fully understand what it is, but let me just add a bit thickness here. And when you subdivide, this is your result. So basically your supportive edge will be this. So if you want that area to be a bit tighter, you will add bevel, you will bevel it, and now you see that this area is a bit sharper. So if you now notice, this is the supportive edge that we originally did. So just don't forget about supportive edges. So there we are. So we need to have a supportive edge. That usually goes on your main outline, but again, remember, it is not a rule. Because it can also happen, let's say that you want a detail here, and you would also need supportive edge here as well. So what I mean, so the difference between supportive edge, so let's say I want to do again circularized components like this. Notice how the edge is behaving. With supportive edge, I will do one more support, and then I will do circularized components. And then this, you will see now that this detail is contained within this area, and that is your supportive edge. So just something to keep in mind. I mentioned that supportive edge will usually go in your outline. Yeah, but that is not the rule. All right, so now we have 3 rules so far. So we need to start with super low poly, we need to make sure even distribution, and then we need to add supportive edge. Now the final one is we need to check if our edge flow is correct. So what does that mean? And let me just go a bit more here. Edge flow. So yeah, there is this example where you can see that depending on the angle, so you see that we have this angle 45 and this angle is fairly straight, so this just continues. Depending on what angles you will use, the result will just follow that angle. So in this case, as you can see, we have this here, this here, this here, and this here. So we have this 45 angles, and the result is fairly smooth. Now, what I mean by edge flow and edge redirection is that we can redirect these edges to work in our favor. So we can continue, same as in that example, and then just delete this one. And you will see immediately that there will be a big difference between this edge and this one, and simply how they're directed, we will get a result based on that direction. So let's just go ahead and do the same thing here as well. So connect here, connect here. All right, so one more here up. There's one more place where we can add actually 2 more. So don't let this angle fool you, because you can add the same cuts here as well, except that they will look a bit different. They will look like this. So basically you will follow this edge and continue it here up, and you will follow this edge and continue it here. The only thing is that I will just make them a bit more closer, like so, and then just delete this one. But it is basically the same thing as here. There is one more that is here. So we're gonna do this next, this here, and then delete this part. So basically, again, the same thing. This is following here down till here, but we just don't want it so wide, and this one will follow here up. Now, one thing that you cannot do is this angle right here. So let me try and recreate this. I would advise against something like this. Depending on an area, it might work. But the thing is, I typically try to avoid let's say a triangle looking, even though this is a quad. You see how it has this angle break, so it's breaking here. If it would be like this, that is okay. So this is what we would call a diamond shape. But if you would, okay, so if you would have on reverse, if this angle would sort of a break and if this angle would pass the middle, this would still be okay, I guess. But as long as you have this break, I would try to avoid that, simply because it will create maybe some unwanted results. So let me again go back. So the thing is that this area we need to solve a bit differently. And if I now check everything here, and if I now decide to select everything and then add some thickness to it here, and we can also add supportive edges. So again, supportive edges by default, ideally you want to have, so let's say call it, this is your main outline. Ideally you want to have two neighboring edges to it. It will give you the best results. So this is our shape so far. And if I now go to the form, bend, and try to bend this thing, you will see that we will not have any distortion. So the only thing that we need to do now is rearrange these two edges. Basically, they need to be sharp as well. So now we know what edge redirection is. I mean, this is a very, very small part of edge redirection. We're going to talk about it probably many more times. But now I'm going to talk about edge flow, because maybe the first instinct that comes to your mind is just add multiple edges like so, and you can tighten it up. But you could also maybe just add one edge loop here and one edge loop here and then tighten it up. When you can, and I would just try to avoid adding edge loops all across the surface if it's not necessary, just because there are always much more elegant way to solve the surface. Now, what would be wrong with adding this? And again, I will just add quickly bend deformer. And again, I'm working on a flat surface, just I think maybe it would be easier to understand. You will see what would happen if you would add these edges. Same thing would happen if, for example, now we can add maybe a different solution. Let's say something like this, till here, till here, till here. Technically, yeah, that would also, you can use this depending on the situation, but again, you will see that, okay, maybe I need to delete history first, and then let's try it again. Depending on the surface, this can also in some situations cause, like you can see here, some shading problem, because simply the flow of the edge is telling you where the highlight is going to go. So we're going to avoid that. We're going to try something else. So I'm going to share something that's made me understand this edge flow a bit better. And how do you know if you have a proper edge flow? So let me go to this area one more time. So as we can see here, this is what we have right now. And okay, so here again, I just need to delete this. Now let's pretend for a second that this right here, that this is either a road, or if you pretend that this is a peak of a mountain. So if you rotate it, this is a peak of a mountain. And then let's pretend that this area has a gravity. And if that area would have a gravity, and let's say we would walk on it, it would stick to the surface regardless of where we go. So if we come to a corner and if we would stick to, let's say, a top of the mountain, then the straight line on that, depending on which stick, so particular line, would show us the direction of the flow of the edges. So just think of it like that. So if this is a gravity or a road or top of the mountain, if you would walk on it, where would your head point? So in this case, it would point like here. In this case, it would point in this direction. So in this case, it would point in this direction. So that is how we can organize our edge flow a bit better. So also, like in this example here, what we can now do, just remove all the necessary edges, and then I'm going to show you again this example, as you can see now a bit more clearly. So if this is again a gravity and you're walking on it, depending on the point you come and where your head is pointing to, this is going to be your edge flow. And then we're going to just repopulate it again. So what we're going to do now is just remove the edges that we do not need, fix the flow of specific edges because most of them are fine. And then we're going to just repopulate it back. And then just by doing so, we will get a bit more cleaner topology. So what we do not need, I don't need this. I do not need this. I do not need this. We can leave it, but I will just remove it. Okay, so now it's much more easier. So starting from here, our edge flow would be like this, simply because this is our gravity center. Here, the gravity would point a bit in this direction and then down. Here, let me just, here it would point again in this direction. So we would need a cut like this here. And in this case, we can put it a bit more to this side. So a bit more, let's say to this side, and then push it here. Now, important thing is to remember that this is not continuing all the way to the end. Remember, we still have the other side. And again, if you think like you're walking here and your head then would point in this direction. So these 2 points, they need to meet somewhere. So let's just meet them right here. And then what we can do is just remove this part as you might not need it. And then I will just, let's say, weld it here and maybe reposition it back to where it was. And then, yeah, we can also remove this for now. So this is basically how you would approach fixing a bit more of your flow. And the reason why is because we would need a bit more space right here in the middle. So we are buying us that space here in the middle. And let me just fix this. Maybe like so. So it really doesn't matter. What also we could have done, I mean, this it really doesn't matter. I just want to show you one more time. You could have left this as it is and then just continue it like here. I just wanted to show you that this is the main principle behind the thought, I would say. And then just continue it here. And then later we're gonna, again, just make sure that everything is more or less equally distributed. And we can delete this as well. We can now here just a bit even it out. So I'm gonna just scale it, and we can even out this one as well. Just scale it like that. And there we are. So if we now add loop here and loop here, you will see that more or less that they're gonna even out and show us the same direction that we already had. And now we can do the same thing here. So I'm going to just middle mouse click here, and I can also even it out a bit. And then I'm going to do one more here and then one more here. And the thing is, we just reorganize the flow slightly a bit. And I don't know if you noticed, but before this was fairly straight, so it was fairly straight, and now we just kind of pushed it a bit to a side to follow the flow of this area. So let me actually rotate this so that you can see a bit better what we did. Simply that these edges sort of follow the flow. So again, if you would be walking where your head would point, so more or less in that direction. So and now that we have this, we can maybe play a bit with these edges, and then we would get a bit more sharper results in this area. So also what you can do, if you really want to, straighten these lines, these edges as well. And then now it's more of a sharper transition there. If we now go ahead and add thickness, bring back all the supportive edges, subdivide, this would be our result. And then if you would again go to deform, add bend deformer, just to check how it would look on the curved surface, and then you would see that it would subdivide much better in this case without any highlights or distortion problems. So yeah, this final what I would call it a rule, where you need to play with edge flow and edge direction, this area will take some practice, simply because not all meshes are the same, and not in all meshes you would want to have the same maybe edge flow like we had here. So I'm going to show you one more example and something else, but you will see that the same principle will apply there as well. So we have shape here, again, fairly basic looking one. And if we go through the same rule sets once more, we will again go from the beginning, is that we will use only a limited number of polygons, points, and edges until we establish shape that we need. So let's say that this is something that we want, fairly simple, fairly basic, and we're going to move from there. So the next step that we would need is we need to add even distribution of edges. So let's just add, let's say, one more subdivision like so. So that's more or less we have enough geometry to work with. And let me also enable symmetry here. So just in case we want to do something else, we have now enough geometry. Now the next thing is to add supportive edges. So this is no longer a flat surface, so just for the main supports, you can just select the edges that you would like that they are sharper. So we'll add all of these, so we'll just bevel those, and this one here, down at the bottom, and let's say this one. All right, so let's say that will do. Okay, actually no, so just this and this. So let's say that's where we want the supportive edges, because for now when we subdivide, you will see that it's fairly smoothened. But if I now go and decide to bevel this, I will add my supports, and they will look like this. So few things are here left open, but we're gonna fix that. But if we now subdivide, we'll see that most of the edges, okay, so I forgot here something, because I want this too. All right, and let's do it one more time. All right, there we are. So now we have something to work with. Now there are a couple of problems here, and as you can notice, we have some open edges. And the reason why we added these supportive edges is now, for example, if we would like to solve this part of the geometry, we need to connect this geometry somewhere. So if you have large spread, let me just now go back. So if you now have a large spread of edges, it's going to be hard until you find the next neighboring edge. Same thing here. It's not going to be hard to, let's say, close the area, because you want to contain this in as little area as possible. So even this, we can maybe just slide it a bit closer, maybe add few more edges here, and then it's going to be easier to, let's say, close this area down like this and contain it within this area, so like that. And we have one more here at the bottom. So now, like I mentioned, we're just solving the geometry that sort of fits. Because what I would like to do then is maybe this better. So like this here, this here. So like this is what I meant. It will take a bit of practice until you manage to see what would be the easiest solution or the best solution to the problem, depending on the edge flow you want to have. So that sorts that. And also one thing maybe I want to show you, if you would, let's say now, slide this here, and let's say slide this here. What we could do also is connect these 2 points and add an edge here. So we have, again, what we're looking for, that even distribution of edges across our model, and that it's sort of following the rule that we set. So if, depending on the flow, again, we can see that if you're walking around here, that if you walk, let's say, along this line, then head your point in this direction and here in this direction, and so on. So this would be just the general rule to follow. And yeah, more or less, I would say that this is it for the topic. I mean, there's a lot more to talk about on topology itself, but I really tried to keep it as beginner friendly as I possibly could, because I understand it can get complicated. So what it takes is just a bit of practice. The more you practice, of course, the better you get. I wouldn't get discouraged, and especially if you're a complete beginner. So if something was not clear, feel free to post down in the comment section down below. If you think that maybe more examples would help, also feel free to post that. And again, I would like to mention we do have our Discord channel where you can post any questions you might have. I'm there to help, so Brian is also there to help. And also one thing, as a small part of my shameless promotion, I would like to mention that we do have a mentorship workshop starting August. That just means that I will be there with you on one-on-one training, meaning whatever you get stuck, that I'll be able to help out. And a part of this, while I'm mentioning, is that a lot of the examples that we covered today in today's video, we do cover in first class. And so then you will, if you're not sure if you're on the right track, you can always ask me directly, and then I can give you specific tips to your workflow, and then how does that work for you. That also comes with the special tutorial that I just personally made. So again, something I want to mention if this is something that you are considering. Also, what I would like to mention about the article, just final thing, I really don't want to make this video any longer. I will update the article based on your feedback. So if something was, again, like I said, not clear, something you would like to add, something maybe that I missed, it will be added there. So yeah, for now, I would just like to thank you for watching. Hope this was helpful enough, and then I see you next time. So have a nice day. Cheers.